morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, hello. Good morning. And hello, kids. And welcome to Season 4 and episode number 402 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah. Today, recording day, is the evening of Tuesday, June 11th for broadcast on Wednesday, June 12th. And it's still a chilly day here at the Beaver Lodge. Don't know what it will be like tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be just a teeny bit warmer. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And with me as always is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. Big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. Before we do anything else today, let's ask Mr. Grizzly, how's your mental health today, sir?
Well, good morning, Mr. Grizzly. Even Mr. Grizzly, Mr. Beaver, I'm Mr. Grizzly. See, I'm a little tired. It's actually Wednesday evening that we're recording this, and it's been a very long day for me. It's only 5 after 8, but it's been a long day. And it's been go, 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 go. I've had about 45 minutes of chill time. So
Same.
Yeah, I'm a little ragged. I'm still wearing my office clothes. So
Yeah, I'm a tad frazzled.
yeah, no,
it's been a very busy day, and it's been one of those days where actually it's been like that for like most of the last 2 weeks. There's like really great stuff and major suckage happen simultaneously. So I like keep on swinging like from yay to
well, I still don't know where I'm going to be on Monday. So
yeah,
I had a conversation about that today, and it's like, well, we're still trying to find a placement for you, and if not, maybe we'll get you to do this. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you need me to do, but what about if I work out this? Anyway, I could be where I am right now come Monday because there's some work that needs to be done that falls outside of my scope.
Mm-hmm.
So possibly I'm back there Monday. I don't know. We're waiting on all these things need to fall into place. So I might have to go back out into the field for a couple of weeks before my vacation begins. So that's not real exciting to me. But my boss is like, I don't want to lose you. So, this would be temporary. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Because he knows that I'm very happy where I am and that going back out into the field is not appealing to me. So, anyway, I don't, you know what? I don't want to think about it right now.
Okay. Well, then we don't have to.
Let's just move it along, shall we? And please, if you may, because we have a special guest with us today.
Yes, we do. As you know, kids and cubs, it is Mental Health Walk Week.
There you go.
Here at the Beaver Lodge. The big day is this coming Saturday. Of course, as you know, if you are in Ottawa, you are welcome to join us. Meeting at noon at the Canadian Museum of Nature at the corner of McLeod and Metcalf.
McLeod. It's
Yeah, the address is 240 McLeod.
Yeah, it's between McLeod and Argyle. It's a block at the start of Metcalfe, basically. So
yeah. So we'll be meeting there. Senator Patrick Brazeau will be there. His lovely spouse, Dr. Marie-Claire Brazeau, has also confirmed that she will be there. So we will have a senator and a PhD. So there you go. Yes, it's going to be wonderful, wonderful time. We're selling some T-shirts. More kids have placed some orders. Thank you very much. People are starting to promote it in other places. We're getting some buzz. The Canadian Mental Health Association has called us, so hopefully we'll be able to talk to them tomorrow and see what else we can do with them, even though it's just a couple of days before. But hey, the more the merrier.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we really did throw this together kind of last minute, as the Kits and Cubs would know who watch every day. Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, but trying to get everything lined up, everything set up, and Anyway.
But it's still a fast turnaround time. I think it was in like April. We decided that we were going to go for this.
Yeah, we kicked around the idea and said, okay, let's do it. And then we picked it like a couple days later. It's like, why don't we do it on the 15th of June, the day before Father's Day? So that, because fathers need help too, because fathers are men still, right? So
it's a good day for it. Probably wasn't the best day for me to choose after closing 3 shows in 4 months. I'm a little pooped, but this is the first year, and next year we'll be able to do more. Now, today, Kit Cubs,
my dog. Sorry.
Delve. There are many aspects with regard to mental health, and one of them is, of course, addiction.
Right.
And today we are going to talk addiction, and we have a guest with us. Our guest goes by Quick Nick. That's alias, also by Ari. And he hosts a podcast called Addicts in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those episodes in the show features a single anonymous caller that shares their personal journey with addiction. Callers have up to an hour to discuss their struggles, challenges, and triumphs openly and honestly, free from judgment or shame. The format allows for deep, meaningful conversations that highlight the transformative power of human connection in recovery. Now, the host, Quick Nick, or Ari, knows what he speaks of.
Right.
When it comes to this podcast, because he's had his own journey of overcoming addiction. So with the podcast, he aims to create a safe and inclusive space where individuals can share their stories without fear, amplifying diverse voices and experience. And then the podcast itself strives to break down the stigma surrounding addiction and mental health struggles, fostering a sense of community and belonging for those navigating the turbulent waters of addiction recovery. And he has been gracious enough to come onto our show and to speak about the work that he does, possibly about his own journey. We'll see about that. Our guest has asked, so Kids and Cubs, to be on audio only, which when our guest asks that, we accommodate.
Happy to accommodate.
And we're happy to do so. So you will not be seeing him, but you will be hearing him. But I do not think in any way, shape, or form that not seeing him is going to detract at all from the quality of this interview. All right, Kids and Cubs. So even though we can't see them, please put your paws up and give a big round of applause for Quick Nick or Ari. Hello.
Hey guys.
How's it
Appreciate
going?
you having me on today.
Welcome to the Beaver Lodge.
Thank you.
Sorry,
all I was going to say was that it doesn't detract from my current podcast, but I've always thought about having a video component. The issue on my podcast would be that the other callers are to remain anonymous.
Right.
And they do most of the talking on my podcast.
Right.
So anyways, you guys got it figured out though. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now, Ari, like I asked Mr. Grizzly, we start every show asking, how's your mental health today? And we also ask of our guests. So how's your mental health today?
It's up and down today. I do appreciate you asking, but I think there's something refreshing about being in an environment where you feel comfortable saying that you're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And to be completely transparent, I had mentioned to you, Douglas, earlier in the day that I wasn't feeling great, but I also knew that this would be the highlight of the day, regardless of how I'm feeling. So I do appreciate you having me on, despite some of the struggles I've had of late. Those struggles, by the way,
Mhm.
not substance abuse or addiction related, but obviously they at times go hand in hand. So it's very fitting to have this conversation today.
All right.
Well,
Excellent.
as an extension of that, I'm going to be utilizing a different microphone for just a moment here, because this is the microphone I use for my mental health chat ASMR show that I also have on YouTube, which kind of falls hand in hand with our mental health walk. It's all sort of intertwined and related to one another, but my ASMR mental health chat, slightly different format. It's just me talking about my struggles with mental health and how I've been able to keep my head above water.
It's funny. I use a totally different register of my voice when I do the podcast, and I saw you switch there, and it's interesting that it's an ASMR podcast. And does that one have video as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
it's,
okay.
Same thing.
Okay. I was only asking because when you use that mic, it sounds as though you're really like you're talking into the audience's ear, and that's what makes podcasting so special.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like you're talking directly to the person who's listening. It's not one of those, you're not creating content where you're speaking, because you're speaking to a niche audience all the time.
Yes.
So you have the ability to understand your audience more than you would on maybe a broader medium. I come from radio and top 40 radio in particular.
Oh, nice.
And we play pop music, which people, when they think of pop music, they often think of a particular timbre of music, but really it just means popular music.
Right.
So before podcasting, I was used to speaking to a very general audience, and with my podcast and with podcasts in general, that's the beauty of it. You're speaking directly to your audience. And that's kind of the vibe I got when you switch microphones. It's like you're speaking directly into my ear.
That's the general idea. And well, my natural speaking voice is just like this. And when I switch the mic, I go from one to the other. And it does sound quite a bit different, because this is a studio mic.
Right.
And this is a broadcast mic. But, you adjust your timbre accordingly. I tend to raise my voice a little bit and the pitch up a little bit, because when I speak really softly, it's hard to hear me if you don't have that mic and you know what I mean? So anyway.
Right.
Kind of got off topic there. My apologies. That happens with me. Squirrel. ADHD.
Can I ask, Ari, let's try to go this way, might be the easiest way through into it. How did you get to the point where you decided that you would like to host this particular type of podcast? And when you're doing it, because like you say, you have guests on, and it's quite likely that your guests would want to be anonymous. In fact, your whole concept is anonymous. How did you get to the point where you decided, hey, this is something that I want to do. It's something I think I can contribute. And what were there any, like, other than, of course, the anonymous factor, is there particular complications or things that you must really pay attention to or pay some care to when you're doing the type of podcast and the work that you're doing?
I mean, I think I need to give some background context, because I think the idea had been brewing for years, but I think it's probably best if I start with my battle with addiction, which began when I was about 14 years old. Started as a way to cope with the pressures and insecurities of teenage life, and that quickly spiraled into a problem that followed me into adulthood. Adolescence is a very vulnerable time. And for me, substances became a crutch to deal with the anxieties and insecurities. And throughout my teenage years, I began pursuing my dream of becoming a radio host. And the pressures of that job, it would be easy to say, I don't want to blame anything. I love that radio industry and the radio medium more than anything, but the pressures of the industry intensified my struggles. But I don't want to make that sound like it was because of the industry. It was because of my own internal battle that I guess was exacerbated by an unspoken expectation to be a type of perfect all the time in radio when you're on the air. You can hear me now when I'm speaking. There's ums and there's pauses. I didn't do any of that when I was on the radio.
No, of course not.
I take these liberties now doing them on the radio. And that came on the air and off the air as well, because you're making plenty of public appearances and so on. But basically what I'm saying is the constant need to maintain a flawless persona exacerbated my addiction. And as I turned to substances to manage my stress and anxiety, the facade of perfection became incredibly isolating and at times damaging. And then I hit a turning point when I came to realize that my life was unraveling. Despite the success, or what I considered success with my career, I was deeply unhappy, and my addiction took a toll on my relationships and my health. I felt trapped in a cycle that I needed to break, and I knew I needed help. So I did at some point reach out to friends and family and professionals. And during my recovery, one of the hardest but most rewarding decisions I ever made was reaching out to people and admitted that I couldn't do it alone, and that I needed support, which is why I created the podcast, because I wanted to provide a platform where people could share their stories and their struggle, maybe in a cathartic sense, because addiction, as I learned, thrives in isolation. And so breaking your silence and using my podcast to allow other people to break their silence could be crucial in their recovery, whatever point they're at in their recovery. So I wanted to give people a voice and show other people that they're not alone in their struggles. And overall, I'd say the podcast is about fostering that connection. It's a safe space for people to speak freely about their struggles without judgment, fear, or stigma. But to circle back to the end of your question, Douglas, that was a particular issue that I had. I wasn't particularly okay with me talking about that subject matter to the masses, which is why I used an alias. I still use an alias, Quick Nick, on the podcast, but now I feel more comfortable. The alias is just because the audience knows me as Quick Nick. But at the time, I wanted to keep myself completely protected like the callers were. And so thankfully, because the podcast is supposed to be a tool for breaking down stigmas, I do now feel comfortable enough telling the world that I do this podcast and what the subject matter of the podcast is. And I'm hoping that by sharing everyone's stories, including my own, we can support each other and show that recovery is possible. And I think each episode is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of community.
Now, anywhere along the way, Ari, I didn't say it at the beginning, but I want you to know, if we ask something that you would rather not answer, it's quite all okay to say, I'd rather not talk about that right now, because we don't know how deep we can go. In that bit that you mentioned, you prompted 4 questions for me. So I'll start with the easiest one. How did you settle on Quick Nick?
This is a stupid. I'm allowed to swear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is for grown-ups.
Stupid fucking story. I was editing the first episode, and I was at the time I was a cigarette smoker, and when I recorded the first episode, I hadn't told the caller what my alias was going to be because I hadn't decided what my alias was going to be. But I went outside for a smoke and started thinking about it, and I said I just went outside for a smoke. What I went outside for was a quick nick.
Quick nicotine hit. I get it. Yeah, that's good.
And here we are.
All right. If you don't mind me asking, what was your drug of choice?
I would say I was a poly addict of sorts. I don't think that I ever had a specific DOC. I think that it was always about any substance that could numb my pain and help me in some cases just move on to the next day without fearing the next day or getting lost in my thoughts about the day prior or the days or the months prior. It was anything that could make me feel as though it was going to be okay for that one night.
Yeah, I understand that. That's anxiety is what that is. It's just beating the hell out of you. And it's like you'll do anything you can to just try and quell that demon. And it is a demon. Anxiety. I have anxiety and depression, and I find anxiety is way worse than depression. Because I've tried to describe it to people. I said, when you're having a full-blown anxiety attack, imagine you've had 16 Red Bulls, maybe some powder substance. I wouldn't know what that's like because I've never done anything stronger than whiskey. But your heart is racing, your mind is racing, and you can't calm down. You can't, and all you want to do is just bring yourself down. So alcohol tends to do that.
Yeah,
it's a downer, right? Literally.
Right. Yeah. And I think, well, just to lead off your point about, comparing depression to anxiety, I think, at least for me, there was a lot of anxiety, and substances helped curb the anxiety. But one of the effects, the effects that you wake up to the next day, the days later, the weeks later, and the months later is the depression.
Yeah.
Which then leads to other symptoms that go back to creating anxiety. A good example would be when I was in school, when I was in university, maybe my substance use would cause me, I don't want to, it's not a silly example at all, but it's just the first example that came to mind as to how the cycle of addiction or substance use and depression, anxiety, kind of went from front to back and then back to front, which was, I would use to curb my anxiety, that anxiety caused by trying to get schoolwork done, which would lead me to the after effects of my substance use would lead to depression, which would lead to more anxiety because the depression caused me to basically not do as good of a job as I thought I could do on some of my schoolwork, which would create more anxiety, lead back into substance use. And then I get my project mark back or my test score back or whatever it is. And then I'd be all depressed about the score that I got.
Were you perchance an overachiever or perfectionist?
Yes. And and it's interesting that you bring that up because that's what I was thinking about when I talked about all the ums and the pauses that I do now make when I do the podcast, which I never did when I was on the radio. That was part of the perfection that I was talking about. But perfection in so many ways on the radio, in school.
And your mind has never stopped. Like it never gets a chance to rest when you're doing a broadcast of that nature where you have to be perfect. It just feeds your anxiety even more so. So then you'll take some sort of substance to calm the anxiety, and then you wake up depressed the next day. It's a never-ending cycle, and it's something that not a lot of people talk about, is how substance abuse is part and parcel to a lot of mental health issues. Sorry, my dog's trying to climb up on me here. And here she comes. Okay, Lola. That's my mental health drug of choice, is my dog.
I think that when it comes to being on the air, you're right. Your brain never stops. But also when I was on the radio, I kind of learned to have two brains going at once, the one that was talking on the radio and the other one that was internalizing 47 other things, which became exhausting, which then leads to that feeling of needing to calm yourself down in whatever way.
Yeah. It is. It's a snake eating its own tail kind of scenario, I think.
Exactly.
Well, when you were young and you discovered or stumbled upon substances, and you kind of realized that they would at first have that effect, how did it come about the first time?
You know what? In the early years, it was always the first substances I encountered were alcohol. And although I did say I was a poly addict of sorts, alcohol was never anything that I really liked. I never liked the feeling. I wanted to be in control. I wanted control over my body.
Right.
I wanted what I thought was more control over my mind. I always thought that alcohol
dulled that sense, yeah.
Right. It put up a sort of tempered glass in front of your eyes, whereas other substances seem to open your senses up a little bit more. But I first stumbled upon alcohol, and I can't say, we talk about gateway drugs and so on. And I think that's a layered topic.
Right.
But when I did start to try other substances, interestingly, I didn't turn into an everyday user at all. For many years. But when I say that I started battling addiction at 14 years old, when I used a substance, I couldn't wait to use it again, but I'd wait weeks, months sometimes to use it, but I couldn't wait for that feeling again. And it would be hard to fall asleep. It would be hard to focus. And I do remember at that early age realizing that it did temporarily seem to heal, probably not the appropriate word, but it temporarily healed a lot of anxieties. So at a young age, I would try and give myself enough leeway. I would try and just, wait weeks and weeks and weeks and say, okay, now I've built up enough of this anxiety. Now I can let it go with whatever substance. And that slowly, went from, months between use to weeks between use. And then eventually I was a daily user. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does.
Sounds like hell.
At first, the times that you were looking forward to, did they coincide either like with events or occasions that you had planned? Or was just sort of like, no, it's been like 3 weeks now, it's time?
They would coincide with my opportunity to use because for the most part, I was using alone. Because you're wanting to hide everything about it, the use, how you are when you're using. And so I guess a crime of opportunity is the best way to put it.
Understood.
But I would say that some events, when you talk about events, like definitely some social anxiety, awaiting some sort of social event would give me lots of anxiety, which would then fill my tank, which would make my usage, it would be more likely for me to use after that event, for example.
Can I ask you a question, and feel free to not answer this if you don't want to, but were you aware of the fact that you had anxiety, or was this like you didn't, because I think so many people don't know what's wrong. They don't know why they feel the way that they do. And then some people will have somebody in their life say, I think this might be the case. We should see a doctor about this. What was your, realization that anxiety was feeding your addiction and vice versa? Was it, did somebody reach out to you and say, this may be the problem? Was it a light bulb moment for you? Or did you just come to the realization? Like, how was it discovered on your end is what I'm asking.
I don't think I was ever able to put a word to it at a young age. I just always thought maybe I was a little awkward. I was also an athlete. I still am an athlete. And I think that some of those same worries that I felt outside of sports and outside of radio, they were the same. What I felt outside of sports was the same thing that I felt leading up to, for example, a big sporting event. And so I guess I would have just called it general nervousness back then.
Yeah. Before you knew what it really was.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm in the arts. It would have been stage fright.
Right. Exactly.
Or nerves.
Yeah.
Right.
Nerves. Yeah.
And that
what
all,
it is anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. And that all comes from wanting to do a good job.
Yes.
Whether it be stage fright or athletic performance and so on. What's interesting about that is that I also realized at a pretty young age that my substance use was making my anxiety worse when I was sober. I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that for many years, which I think perpetuated a cycle of shame and guilt with myself, because I knew I wasn't performing probably at the way that I could in every facet of life. I would use, because I wasn't performing at every facet of life, to heal that shame and guilt temporarily, and then not perform at my highest level in those facets of life. And then, like I said, that cycle just continues.
Shame and guilt is a killer.
Yeah. It's a never ending cycle. And I'm happy that you were able to break the cycle, because there's many people who never can. And sadly, we lose them to, whatever the case may be. I don't want to get too specific there, but I have seen, I've lived with addicts in the past, and I've had friends who were able to, get clean and sober, others less so. And some who just one day woke up and went, that's it, I'm done. I'm like, what? Like, literally cold turkey everything, which I didn't know that. And I'm thinking of a specific individual. I didn't think it was possible with this person. And he just one day said, no, I'm done. That's it. Quit drinking. And this was a guy who would drink 24 beer a night, 7 days a week, never missed work, was never late, did his job to perfection. But when, would start at 7 a.m. and at 3:01, he was on his way out the door, because he had to get to the tavern to get some drinks into him. And he did that for years. And then one day just said, nope. And I don't know if his addiction was fed by, he had a traumatic moment in his life. I can't get too specific here, obviously. He had a very traumatic moment in his life, and that drove him to drinking. And he never really got over that. And I think that was what kept him doing it. And then I think the anxiety fed into it. I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor, but I'm meandering here a little bit. I apologize. It's been a long day. But it's just a specific instance where I think so many people can't control their addiction because they're so afraid of who they'll be without it.
Yeah. Couple things there. It is at times, I guess, a little shocking when somebody can go from using every day to not using at all. But at the same time, personally, I'm not surprised when I hear it. Obviously, there are specific cases when it comes to, opioid use, for example, where you do have to do a medical detox, or else you're going to have a really tough time. But when it comes to, and I mean, to an extent, alcohol too, if you go cold turkey, that it
can kill you.
Right. But at the same time, if you break yourself enough, I could see why somebody would want to wake up the next morning and just say, never again. I don't want to do this to myself anymore. Because when you keep hurting yourself, I always, I've said this on my podcast before. I think that people who are a little less sympathetic when it comes to addiction, and maybe just don't understand that it is a mental health disorder. It's a disease
really
of
is.
sorts. I think that people think that when they're abusing substances, that these people just don't want to quit having a good time. But I can tell you, being addicted to a substance is not a good time. There's nothing good about it. It's not fun. It's the way we self-medicate. It's an unhealthy way to self-medicate. And so when you go so far down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and keep hurting yourself time after time, it just never surprises me when somebody wakes up and says, I'm done hurting myself.
Mm-hmm. I think so many, everybody turns to something different to deal with, whether it's, anxiety or depression, or maybe childhood trauma that has transcribed itself into both anxiety and depression. And then we try and, like you say, medicate in the only way we know how. I never used drugs, never in my life. Here I am, I'll be 56 in a few weeks. Never smoked a joint, never did anything at all. Whiskey is the strongest drug I've ever taken. There are reasons for that. It was a conscious decision on my part. But I've certainly had a few hangovers in my day. and largely related directly to the anxiety. It was not like, it's never been a problem for me. I'm lucky in that I don't have an addictive personality. But there are times when the anxiety would be so bad, it was just give me some whiskey just to slow the heart rate, slow the brain, slow it all down, knowing full well that the next day was going to be living hell, and that would feed into depression. But when you're in the middle of the ocean and you're looking for a piece of driftwood to grab onto, it's what you do, right? And society has enabled us to do that because the things we need to make ourselves get better, mental health supports, having somebody to talk to as a man who is struggling with anxiety, and oftentimes many men and women for that matter, I don't even know they have it. They just drink to, silence whatever that hamster running on the wheel is, and don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of what their friends, their family, their colleagues will think of them. With Gen Z, I noticed these kids have opened up and they're just like, no, I think I need to go to see a therapist. I'm like, what? That, Gen X here, rapidly approaching 60. That was not a realistic thought for us at all. We were like, no, that's only for crazy people.
Yeah, walk it off, buck up, man up.
Rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. Thankfully, the younger generations have taught myself, and I can only speak for myself, how to be open about these things, how to be open about having addiction or anxiety or depression. And oddly enough, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ari, but I think addiction in many instances is easier for people to talk about openly than maybe anxiety and depression is. What do you think about that? Am I being ridiculous, or is that, because society has been dealing with people openly discussing that for so much longer? Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I think you'd be right if that substance were to be alcohol. And before, when this is my second, this kind of leads to my second point that I forgot about, and you bring back to the surface by me answering this question. But I think that it's easier to talk about when it's alcohol, because in many cultures, our culture, here in the Western world, drinking alcohol is a social norm. Celebrations, gatherings, casual meetings all involve alcohol, making its consumption seem ordinary.
Right.
And to some at first, it seems harmless. It's widely available. It's legal for adults. And that contrasts many other addictive substances that are illegal or heavily regulated. So the accessibility contributes to its normalization, which I think contributes to people being open with talking about alcohol misuse or alcohol abuse. And I think that you'd be right that somebody is more prone to being open about that type of problem rather than anxiety when it comes to I I don't want to guess your age, guys, but I do think I'm a little bit younger.
Possibly.
I'm thinking,
Possibly.
yeah, a little bit,
Right. And so I think, quite honestly, in your age group, I do think that there are stigmas associated with talking about
Oh yeah.
anxiety, particularly amongst men. It's more manly to be addicted to alcohol than to have anxiety.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right.
Yep.
It's there's a good man. That man can hold his liquor. You know why he's drinking that? Because his head is going crazy right now, because his heart is beating 1,000 miles an hour, and he's just trying to calm the demon down.
It's like he shouldn't be holding that much liquor.
Right.
But you're right about that. It's very much a different generational thing, whereas the younger generations, I'm thankful for the fact that they're open to speaking about it. And not only that, they're not passing judgment on you. There's no stigma attached. If you know, like I said, I'll be 56 in a couple of weeks. I am lucky enough that I've been open about it for a number of years now. So everybody in my circle, I just openly speak about it. And every now and then I'll see somebody get a little bit uncomfortable. And that's when I'll approach them later and go, did I make you uncomfortable, or is there something you want to talk to me about? And 9 times out of 10, yeah, I think, Paul, I think I might have anxiety, or I might have depression. 9 times out of 10, that is what happens. Every now and then it's like, no, I just didn't know how to deal with it. But I think when I get that statement, it's because they're not open to telling me that they're going through the same thing. It takes one to know one. You can see it in other people, and I'm sure, Ari, you've seen it in other people.
Yeah, I mean, people at first always fear judgment in some sort of way. Despite some progress we've made, there's still significant stigma around mental health in general. Individuals fear being judged or discriminated against if they're open about their struggles. There's an emotional vulnerability to it. Talking about your mental health struggle can be emotionally taxing, and might also involve revisiting painful experiences. But at the same time, I think that if there are people like yourself in this situation that you mentioned, leading by example, and influencing people to reduce stigma and encourage others to open up, that makes huge headway when it comes to talking about mental health, and it positively reinforces the message that seeking help and being honest are courageous and positive steps.
Well, I've never felt courageous about it, to be honest with you. I felt I got to a breaking point where I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. And I know it made a lot of people uncomfortable. I tried talking about it in the 90s, and nobody wanted to hear it. They would say things like, "Oh, you have a good life. You should be happy." I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And I didn't talk about, I was open about my depression for a long time. And it was about 7 years later that I finally disclosed that I had anxiety. And it was in a moment where I was out with some friends, and we were out to see a live music event. And my friend says, I'll go get us a round of drinks. I went, okay. And I looked over at him at the bar, and I could see he was having an anxiety attack. I could see it physically. So I walked over, I put my arm around him. I said, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" He looks at me and I go, "You're having an anxiety attack right now. Don't worry. I got you. You'll be okay. We'll talk this through. Just breathe a little bit and you'll be all right." And then he opened up to me about it for the first time ever. And he says, "I've had this since I've known you." He's like, "How did you know that?" I go, "Dude, it takes one to know one. I could see it in you, and I hope I can help you." And he said, just you disclosing that to me and talking to me and recognizing that in me, he says, oddly enough, I should feel panicked because somebody saw that this is what's happening to me.
Somebody saw my secret.
Yeah. He says, but somebody who cares about me saw what was happening to me and came to my aid, and I feel better now. And he's been able to openly talk about it since then. And I was not trying to, your burden is your burden to carry. I don't like to say that, but that's what it is. Depression and anxiety are burdens. How you choose to carry it is up to you. I don't pass judgment on anybody. I carried mine in silence for decades. I don't anymore. I can't change the past, but I can forge a new future. And I started on medication in the perfect opportune time, February 28th, 2020, was when I started on medication for anxiety and depression. A
And
few
13
weeks
days
later, the
later,
whole world shut down. So it was like perfect timing on my part, just serendipitous, if you will. But and I don't tell people that you need medication. I'm like, everybody has their own path to walk, and I don't know.
what
Everybody's
worked
got
for
to
you?
you got to figure out your own path, right? You know what that is. But I'm always there to try and help somebody if they need somebody to talk to, somebody to listen to, somebody to just tell them about their experiences. And I find sharing, and I was in group therapy a couple of years ago for something not related to this, actually. It had to do with insomnia and how we were all suffering horribly. And I was not one to believe in group therapy, but after doing it, holy crap. Just sitting in I understand how AA and NA work now. Sitting in a room full of people discussing the things that they're going through, and you realize, I'm going through that too. There's a sense of camaraderie and community and safety, knowing that you're not alone anymore. And everybody always says that, you're not alone in this, but you feel alone until you know that you're not.
Mhm.
Right.
Did someone come to approach you at any point, Ari,
With regards
to ask if you were doing well? Did somebody notice that there was something up with you somewhere along the way?
no, I think
Ooh.
because I had been using so long, you become a professional at being able to hide the fact that
Mhm.
you have a problem. I think that maybe it would display to somebody as just general anxiety, paranoia, general life stressors. But I managed to display it for the most part as nothing too out of the ordinary.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to bring you back to when you were at your worst, unless you want to talk about that, but I don't want to bring you there. But from the moment where you might have felt you were at your worst to the moment that you decided, you know what, I need to change something. Because was that a long period?
I felt like I had tried to earlier I talked about people waking up one day and just saying they're done.
Mhm.
I had tried that a couple times in my 20s, where you say you're done and then you realize you're not done.
Mm.
I think it was a slow burn for me to recover. There were as many relapses in recovery.
Mhm.
Um, I think this isn't too personal, but I think something that I dealt with throughout my recovery and relapses was, and I realize this is really particular, but it's something I wanted to touch on, was the role that social media plays. And
Mm.
how it can exacerbate loneliness when you're feeling alone, you're feeling isolated, and then you see how other people present themselves, and that makes you feel like you're even more lost.
Mhm.
And so I guess um, that was a that was I shouldn't blame social media. It sounds a little silly,
Mhm.
but I
It's
guess
a
when
real
you
thing, though.
right, well, I think it's very much a real thing because social media platforms can a variety of things happen on them. They can spread misinformation and stereotypes about mental health and addiction, which reinforce negative perceptions. A good example, it's not a particular example, but I'd be scrolling through social media and you see addicts being made fun of, particularly celebrities, often
Mhm.
being made fun of for their substance abuse problems. And while I was experiencing um, the same type of issues, it made me feel even more isolated, more broken, had more shame and more guilt, which then led to more depression and more anxiety, which at one point led back into using.
Mhm.
And to say so, like, I'm sure those things happened on regular terrestrial television back in the day, and like I'd be lying if I said I didn't, I didn't have some anecdote about something that might have shamed a celebrity who was dealing with addiction when I was in my early days in radio and young and dumb and didn't know any better. But I guess this point also leads off of what some young people experience when it comes to their mental health. There's cyberbullying. Individuals with mental health problems or addiction, their conditions can worsen, which deter people from opening up about their struggles because they fear that they're going to be bullied in some shape or form because they see that celebrities are being bullied for the same issues. To circle back to my previous point, social media showcases like idealized versions of life, making it harder for individuals to admit to struggling with mental health or addiction issues for fear of appearing flawed or weak. And so in my case, I think oftentimes I was dealing with comparative stress, comparing oneself to others on social media. And that can contribute to mental health struggles for anyone, which increases the stigma associated with these issues. And that's not to say there aren't all of this. There's a beauty in social media. There's increased awareness about this subject matter on social media. The obvious reason, information sharing. These platforms are powerful tools for spreading accurate information about mental health and addiction, helping to dispel the myths and educate the public. And they're also great for advocacy and campaigns. Organizations and people use social media to run awareness campaigns, share personal stories, and advocate for mental health and addiction support. And the other thing too is celebrities and influencers speak openly about their mental health and addiction on these platforms, which helps to normalize these conversations. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that some of the younger generation, there's a dual role of social media in perpetuating and combating stigma. Society can work towards more informed, empathetic, and supportive environments for individuals facing mental health and addiction challenges. And I'd be lying if I said that social media didn't impact my own mental health at times. And I don't really think that answered your question, but when you asked the question, Douglas, I thought back to a couple of the relapses that I had in my 20s, and I always found I wasn't watching much, terrestrial TV or anything like that. I always scrolling through social media, and I think that a lot of my negative thoughts came from my cell phone, scrolling Instagram and shit like that. But yeah, I don't think that answered your question. It kind of did, but did
I think it did.
Okay.
Yeah, it did. Mr. Chrisley, I have a little clip there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to load it up. Give me a moment or two.
Okay, it might be having a little difficulty.
I am.
It's an author named John Haidt. I don't know if you've heard of him. If some of our viewers are a fan of The Daily Show, he was on very recently, and he talks about youth today, and he basically calls it the anxious generation, and says that it basically that childhood has been essentially rewired at the moment, thanks to things like social media. And I was hoping if we can load it up, we can play it, and I can get your thoughts on what it is he's saying, and if it rings a bell for you.
Okay, this was on PBS, so it shouldn't give us a copyright, but we'll find out.
Yeah, Firing Line with Margaret Hoover.
Why didn't we see this danger coming?
So there are a couple of reasons. A big one is that back then most of us were still techno-optimists. But what we didn't realize is that by 2012 or so, the technology was not something that taught the kids anything. They don't learn how to program. They don't learn anything about computers. They are, in a sense, the product. They are just being sucked along on a conveyor belt. Their attention, it's almost as though the companies are able to drill down into their brain and extract their attention, and they extract vast, vast quantities of attention from every child. 5 hours a day, the latest Gallup survey, 5 hours a day is what American teenagers spend just on social media, especially TikTok and YouTube. And that's American childhood now.
Why are young people's brains so vulnerable?
Because human childhood is this amazing, unusual childhood in which we have these very large brains, and the brain, it has a certain form when you're a child, but then in puberty, it kind of rewires, it kind of locks down into a configuration, beginning from the back to the front. The prefrontal cortex, and just behind the forehead, is the last part of the brain to myelinate, to sort of lock down into an adult configuration. And it's guided by local inputs. And so all over the world, traditionally, adults would help children make the transition from child to adult, and they would bring them into local knowledge, and they would get them ready to make this role change. We don't do that. Instead, what we do is hand you this device. So this is about the worst thing you can imagine to give kids at the beginning of puberty. And the Great Rewiring radically altered the inputs to children, taking away most of what they used to do, most of their older inputs, including other people, and swapping in screens. And again, we didn't know that that was going to be terrible in 2012. We didn't know it. Now we do.
Wow.
Does that, because I mentioned that remember that you mentioned, you said you started when things started to happen when you were a teenager. Does any of that ring a bell of some kind for you?
Yeah, I think, growing up with technology, there's constant connectivity. Like there's an omnipresence of digital communication, meaning that we're always connected, which leads to so many things: information overload, cyberbullying, unrealistic comparisons, like I talked about. And I'm sure other, excessive screen time before bed probably disrupted sleep patterns, leading to increased stress and anxiety. I think that, obviously it can, in some people, create a lack of physical activity, creating sedentary lifestyles, partly due to increased screen time, which can contribute to poor mental health, poor physical health rather, which then can contribute to poor mental health. I think the one thing about that clip, though, I think some of what children experience nowadays, the rewiring, as he put it, isn't all related to technology, though. I feel like, there are other parts of childhood that have been rewired. Children, this is what I notice, is kids today have so much packed into schedules with very little time. This is what I remember as a kid. And this used to eat. I know that this used to eat at me. Having a packed schedule with little time for unstructured play. I believe, I'm not a doctor of any sort, but I feel like unstructured play, quote unquote, is crucial for mental and emotional development. And there's a difference between screen time versus play time. The time spent on electronic devices has replaced the time used to be spent playing outdoors, which is essential to mental health.
Just playing a game of catch, you know, whether it's a football, a baseball, just a frisbee, just doing something as simple as that, which gets your mind away from all the junk. No screen time, fresh air. Yeah, we're not doing that nearly enough. Right.
The kids probably have a nature deficit, and I probably had this for 10 months of the year when I was a kid in school, which was, a lack of exposure to nature, which as an adult, I know for a fact can be linked to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. Oh, yes. And in a lot of ways, I think that general media exposure, it's easy to say that children exposed to adult issues like violence or sexuality and drug use through the media at an earlier age can lead to some sort of confusion and anxiety. But I feel like that's a tough one. That probably one that I'm not educated enough to speak on. But the rewiring of childhood in the digital age, like he talks about, combined with the societal pressures and environmental challenges, as he says, has made mental health a significant challenge for young people. And I think that combating that just comes down to approaching mental health through education and supportive environment and healthy lifestyle and access to professional help. Yeah, I mean, I agree with him. Childhood has been rewired, but I don't know if it's all about technology. There's so many factors, and I can speak to my generation. So many, this isn't you guys probably know just as well as I do, but like there's a high divorce rate. There's lots of family conflict among many families, which can create an unstable environment, probably more of that than there was back in the day, which affects a child's sense of security and well-being, which then leads to depression and anxiety and so on. There are other factors too that have nothing to do with electronics. I'd say, like, I remember this as a kid in high school, where there's this immense pressure to perform well academically from society. So that way you can, for your college and university admissions, which have their own competitive nature, which adds stress and exacerbates depression and anxiety again. So I guess that's all to say that the world is evolving fast, and it is partly due to technology, but I think there are other social factors at play that are also rewiring children.
Yeah, I would agree. For you, when you decided that you had to make a change, was it one of those things that gradually sort of came to you, or again, as Mr. Grizzly, was it one of those explained or give an example of? Was it just like one moment you said, "Yep, you know what? That's it. I can't do this no more. I'm done."
The first time I sought formal support was around 2014. I went to an addiction counselor, and I don't think I was ready in 2014. Okay. In 2014, I guess I was like, 23 or something. And my math sucks. In 23, 24, something like that. Anyway, and I went to an addiction counselor, and he gave me some tools, and I just wasn't ready to deal with the discomfort of staying sober. I remember driving home from the addiction counselor that day. I'd have to go home and have to do my show. And I remember thinking, there is not a chance in hell I'm going to be able to do my show on the radio and go home and stay sober. I am, whatever happens today for the rest of the day, there's something, that trigger, that switch is going to flip on my way home from work. And it's like I didn't even try.
But what made you go?
You're not ready till you're ready, though, right?
Yeah, you're right. What made me go?
Because you're sort of in that in-between thing, right? You know that there's something, and you know enough to go.
Right.
But you also like leave there and you go like, yeah, like that's going to happen.
I knew that my anxiety was only increasing, and I knew it was because of substance use. I knew that had to be it. I felt like I was struggling in social situations more than normal. Like I said, I think I displayed well, but I think my social anxiety leading up to those situations continued to get worse and worse. I think for me, it was also paranoia. I was always suspicious of people. I was always suspicious of their intentions, and it kept getting worse. And one side of my brain told me that my suspicions and paranoias were real. The other side of my brain told me, this is so absurd. Why are you paranoid about this stuff? And that other side of my brain that knew it was absurd was able to say, okay, whatever the other side of my brain is saying is it's crazy that I'm thinking that way. I definitely need help.
Okay. You're a very self-aware individual to be able to recognize all of that, because I know other people who have struggled the same way and had no realization whatsoever. You're very fortunate in that, sir, because sure, you did struggle. You did have this terrible addiction, but you are more self-aware than most human beings I've ever spoken to.
Which might be a blessing and a curse, because I feel like self-awareness, I think that's a big thing when it comes to social anxiety, being self-aware, being aware of extremely aware of yourself, being aware of other people, being aware of your own emotions, being even more aware of other people's emotions and feelings. I felt like
and
always
reactions to you.
Right. Exactly.
Two-headed dragon eating its own tail while the other one is spewing fire everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeesh.
yeah,
that's hell, man.
That does not sound like fun at all.
No, that's hell.
See,
that's my definition of hell.
Yeah. See, I'm one of these weird people that's like hardwired for optimism and happiness. So it's when I have a tough moment, I have a tough moment, and it's sort of like, that going on a bear hunt song. Can't go over it, can't go around it, can't go under it, got to go through it. So I just like take a deep breath, I put my head down, and I go through it. Because I've had situational depression, after my mom died, which is like, somebody turns around to you and says, well, yes, of course you're down. You're not going through anything that any normal person wouldn't also be going through in this situation with these stresses. But touch wood, I've been fortunate to not have to experience any of those things. But I have lots of friends who do, and in my family, my mom was schizophrenic, for example, which is a whole other kettle of fish, than addictions. But my first partner was the first person I dated, and I was with for 4.5 years, and we were best friends for 26. Was a functioning alcoholic, the way that Mr. Grizzly was describing one of his friends. I grew up in foster homes. My foster father was a pretty heavy drinker, and he always had the morning rages. Never had anything nice to say in the morning, that type of stuff. So I've been familiar with it from the outside. For those of us who have friends, who have people we care about, based on your experience of talking to other people and your own, what should we be looking for if we're concerned about people in our midst?
In terms of spotting if they may or may not have an addiction issue,
or even just like something like, that heavy anxiety or something like that could end up leading down that path.
I mean, I think watching for, at least, when you just talked now about being in a relationship with somebody who struggled, I thought about my relationships, which were impacted by my struggle. And I thought about how my behavior changed dramatically. I became more secretive, more irritable, more unreliable. Being around somebody who's like this might cause confusion for you. It might be hurtful for you, because you don't understand why they're acting differently. So I think that if someone around you is causing emotional distress to the point where they withdraw from you or they isolate themselves, their communication is impacted. I remember my communication broke down to the point where when I became so consumed with my addiction, I stopped sharing my feelings and my experiences, which made my loved ones feel shut out and helpless. And if you're feeling those things, then there's probably something happening with the person that's making you feel these things. So I guess generally I would say extreme changes in behavior that you're not used to. And I think the thing about that is you learn, as the person who struggles, after you learn how important it is to keep open lines of communication, to be honest about your struggles and progress. And I make an effort to listen and understand the feelings of people around me, because if they're opening up, that means they want help in some shape or form. If they're not, then there's probably something that you don't know about what's going on with them. There's obviously something you don't know about what's going on with them, which means that it might just continue to get worse.
Hey.
Yeah, that's
No, but it's true. You're talking about it, and it's like that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I think back of my relationship with this person, and it was like, yeah, it did. That's what it was. It was. They had the issue before we met, and because that was something I was used to, it was comfortable. Right? Had it in the foster home. I just moved from the house with one addict to a house with another addict with the same addiction.
Yeah, it was familiarity, right?
Addiction. Yeah. And then the light went on. At one point for me, the light that went on was that we'd always end up in these like really, really battle royale verbal arguments. But somewhere in there at that time, because my partner, the blackout where you're still like talking and whatnot, but you don't remember anything. And then the next morning, didn't even remember we had an argument, whereas I worked myself up all emotionally and cried and all that and was hurt. And like the next morning, so it's like, I don't remember that. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm getting myself all worked up for something you don't even freaking remember? Like, why am I doing this? Right? And then I had to make a change. At first, the first change was like time you spend drinking is time you choose necessarily not to spend with me. And then we were spending time apart. And same thing with our friendship. And then many, many years down the road, it moved from alcohol to other substances, and then the total isolation. We went from having breakfast together every morning, pretty much, because we lived in the same apartment building, to him like being, when I moved into my condo, when I got a condo, being just 3 blocks away from each other, and him never having time.
Yeah,
at all.
Routine disruption. Plans being like I talked about, plans being canceled, responsibilities being neglected. Those things impact both people's lives, and it's an indicator that, when routine being disrupted is such a powerful sign that something is wrong, because routine doesn't get interrupted for anyone, regardless of the routine, for no reason at all. There's always a reason, whether that routine is important or not. When it gets disrupted, there's a reason. So you talk about not having breakfast together. If you had breakfast together every single day, if you don't know the reason why that routine was interrupted, then there's something, maybe something nefarious going on.
Yep. And I didn't know for years. Then somebody came and told me, your best friend does this, right? And I was like, well, yeah, but he did that at a bar. And when he's at a bar, he's drinking, and time spent drinking is time we don't spend together. So I never saw it. And then there was one day I found out, because you get bolder. People get bolder and more brazen. And then one day, just out of the blue, a dime bag of cocaine. He just we were about to go camping and get in the car and go. And he just opened it up and pushed it right on the table, made 2 lines, gave one to his friend, took just 2 lines, both of them, one each, a whole dime bag, right in front of me. So, okay, let's go, jump in the car. And I'm sitting there going I'm not getting in the car with you. It was the first time I ever saw it. It's like this guy didn't even alcohol, yes, but didn't even smoke joints. So it's when everybody's telling me your friend is doing this stuff and actually dealing it, I'm going, yeah, right. I was and then right in front of me, and I'm thinking have you done this before? It's have you allowed me to get in your car with you after you've done that before? It's like, yeah. And it's like, and it was just so flippant about it. And that's when I realized, oh my God, how many times have you put me in danger? And that was because up until then I was fighting so hard to try to save my friendship. And it's one of those things, sometimes the harder you fight, the more you end up pushing someone away to try to keep them close. But that was the moment the light went on, and then it got worse. It got to a point where I was, he was in the hospital and there was yellow tape in his apartment, and I was cleaning blood splatters off a wall.
That's pretty bad.
So yeah, things. It wasn't going down a good path. He eventually found his moment and jumped off as well. Got off the stuff, but not before our friendship was over. And it just couldn't be rebuilt. I don't want to. It's such a personal question.
Ask away.
Did you lose people? Not like death. I mean, people that were close to you. Did people just say, you know what, he's there's just too much drama, I can't anymore, and just walk away? Oop, I think we may have.
Oh, sorry.
Are you still there?
I was talking. Yeah, my mic just wasn't on.
Okay.
Absolutely. I lost mainly romantic relationships, people that I cared about, and I carry a lot of guilt for the pain that I caused, knowing that my actions hurt the people I love, and that's a heavy burden. And I regret that lost time and those missed opportunities to be with those people. At the same time, I had to learn those lessons to find the person that I'm with today.
Right.
And as painful as all of that was, I say this all the time, I probably would have gone through all that shame, heartbreak, hurt, and regret so I can meet this person. I wouldn't have met this person if I didn't learn the things that I learned. But
hard lessons to earn a great reward, right?
Right. It's you learn in those times that that you don't want to cause that type of strain on a person. You don't want to lose trust. You don't want people to withdraw from you, because that'll hurt other people for a variety of reasons, but it'll also end up, in my case, exacerbating at the time for me, my addiction problem. I had lost people because of my addiction problem, and then my addiction problem continued because I had lost people.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every situation ends up feeding itself.
Yeah.
It's so insidious.
Yeah. And
jeez.
Yeah. When addiction caused me to be emotionally distant, and your loved ones are the last people that you're supposed to be emotionally distant from. And right. I think addiction causes you to be emotionally distant for a variety of reasons. One, because you want to be physically distant, because you're using, and two, because you're battling all those demons. And in order to be open with the demons that you're having, you have to be open about your addiction problem. And at the time, I felt as though I couldn't be fully open with what I was experiencing. So I think, like you said, hard lessons to learn, but I'm glad that I learned them, because I probably would have repeated that behavior. If I hadn't lost these people, I would have repeated it constantly, and end up hurting those people more, and probably wouldn't have learned my lesson enough to meet the person that I'm with today.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to hear that, to hear you say the person that I'm with today. It's I love.
She's lovely. We I talked at the top of this podcast about having a rough week, and if I was feeling as rough in the midst of substance abuse, if I experienced this type of week that I've been experiencing while abusing substances, I wouldn't be able to have the open lines of communication about my feelings with my partner,
Mhm.
and that would have made this week even harder, which would have,
Right.
which I feel like I've said it 90 times, perpetuated the cycle of substance use.
No, it's true though. You're absolutely right.
Right. So you went the first time and you weren't ready. How long did it take for you to go and then you realize that you actually are ready?
I think you might be muted there, bud. We can't hear you.
Again, I can't. Sorry. It's ironically, I only turned down my microphone because I don't have any addictions other than to nicotine. So I'm nicking my vape. So I turned my microphone down. Sorry about that. I think when my time in radio was done, when I
Okay.
left radio, I felt as though I had the time and resources to take all the time I needed to work on myself.
It's ironic you say that. We have some friends.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
We have some friends who, same thing, when they left radio or radio left them or whichever the case may be, that's when they decided, okay, this is not right. Let's get straight. And one of the things that they'll talk about frequently is how often they still bump into some old radio folks, and those people are still doing the same things they did for years. They're repeating the same habits, the same destructive behavior. So I think something about radio attracts that, maybe, or the industry attracts it, or the industry accepts it. Maybe you tell me.
I think hard to say because I've been gone for so long. I've been gone for about 3 years, but I think there's a lot of people in it who struggle with what I struggled with, which is this constant need for some sort of, maybe for not everyone it was a perfection, but I think, like we talked about, performance anxiety.
Mhm.
I also think that the reality is that business is in a lot of ways struggling, and being employed in it gainfully employed in it continues to be harder and harder and harder. And I think that leads to extra stress amongst the employees, which can obviously have impacts on people's mental health.
So when you got to the point where you were ready, how did you find help or help find you?
I went looking for help. I reached out to friends, family, and the other resources that I had, being my doctor and mental health professional, and that started a routine of weekly therapy appointments and new medication. For years I'd been on medication, but I wasn't taking it when I should be. The thing with medication for me is it has so many side effects, and I didn't want to deal with those side effects for many years until this point came, and I decided, you know what, it's worth dealing with the side effects, at least temporarily, to at least put myself on a path to feel a little bit differently, to allow my thought patterns to change a little bit and give myself a better chance at recovery. And that came about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And it hasn't been 100% linear.
Yeah. Rarely is.
Right. And so I think right now I'm in a good, supportive, loving relationship. I have a great family, good friends, and I'm surrounded by solid mental health care professionals. Still always trying to tweak with the perfect mix of medication. And I think I was fortunate in a lot of ways. Getting laid off from radio allowed me to take the time to get better, because without it, I probably would have while still being on the radio, I probably would have continued down the path that I was on.
Yeah, the downward spiral. I've heard so many stories like this from people when they got out of radio, how they got clean and sober, and talked about, you know, some of their destructive behavior, how, well, we could go on for hours. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. But I've heard so many stories. I have a lot of friends who work in radio. I've never worked in radio, but I have a lot of friends who have. Some still do. Some have recently found themselves unemployed, and they can tell you the stories about physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, substance abuse, you name it, that they've all encountered in the workplace. And some of them have come to me and said, I'd like to talk about it, but not yet. Like, I understand. Because if I talk about it now, everybody's going to know who I am. Like they want a certain amount of anonymity, but it's a little too fresh. So to discuss it, everybody would figure out pretty quickly who they were, even if I disguised their voice and said, you know, Mr. X or whatever the case may be, or Madam X. Or so, you know, I have friends who want to talk about it, but they just the situation isn't right.
I mean, I do want to say that, like, I had nothing but great times in radio. I love the industry, love the people. I think that all my, and I can't speak for anyone that you're talking about, but I think that all my struggles were simply the product of my own internal struggles. I don't think there were any external forces that impacted my behavior. I think it was me, the way I was wired, my temperament, my own internal battles. But I could see why anybody from any workplace might have their issue exacerbated by the fact that they're in an environment that isn't healthy for them.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time working, and it makes sense that it can have impacts on our mental health away from work. I think everybody is impacted by their mental health, their work life away from work. And yes, the fact that the industry isn't doing well can definitely cause people to have a little bit more fear and anxiety as they go throughout their day.
Oh yeah, indeed.
We have to wrap up soon, but before we do, I wanted to ask about your podcast. How long ago did you start it?
I started in June of 2021.
Okay. And I would suppose, because of the anonymous format, that some of your guests, if you have them, it might be the first time they are openly talking about it.
Yes. In a lot of cases, they state during the episodes that this is the first time they've talked to somebody about it openly, unless they're a person who's in recovery at the time, in which case they've told, you know, their peer mentorship groups in whatever form they come in. And also in some cases, these people are in active addiction and their friends and family do know. So I guess every case is a little bit different.
Okay. Where you are now in your recovery, how is that for you that people are placing that trust in you?
I mean, it's an honor and a privilege for them to call me and them trust me to listen, and that they've found some sort of solace in the podcast. And I think that in that sense, the podcast became its own animal. I recorded an episode, and a good animal, a kind, sweet animal. It became its own animal in the sense that, you know, I aired the first caller and then people started calling. And I think that every call that I put on reinforces that it's a safe space that is judgment free. And like I said, privilege and an honor that I'm the place that the person they choose to call to get it off their chest, in some cases for the first time.
And I know you don't, I would assume you don't do it to get something, but you cannot help but get something if you do that. So what does it bring you?
I mean, for me, it's my own tool for on my recovery journey because it gives me the sense of community that I'm looking to give the callers. And
I understand that.
it gives me my own time to reflect. I see myself in every story somehow, even if the person's not addicted to or didn't struggle with a substance abuse issue. I can relate to every person who calls in some way. And so it's a chance for me to also cathartically reflect. And so it's turned into my own little therapy session at times, even though I'm talking to the caller. I'd be lying if I said at times I wasn't helping myself too.
I can completely understand that because I find oftentimes when I sit down to do the ASMR mental health chat, some nights I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know. And then it just flows out of you and you feel better afterwards. And there's people in the chat. I don't have people who call in because it's an ASMR style show, but I always feel better afterwards because I've had a chance to discuss what I'm going through. And I've had people tell me the only reason I kept doing it because people said, that really helped me. I'm like, it did. Yeah, I was able to relate to what you were going through, and you gave me a couple of new tools I didn't have before to try and deal with things. So, yeah, I get it. I really get it. It's like a therapy session each and every time, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that you never know what you're gonna. I never know what I'm gonna get with each and every caller, and I think that that's part of the beauty of it too. I pick up the phone and they're a complete stranger, and then by the end of the phone call, in a lot of ways, I know some of their deepest, darkest secrets.
Right.
And it feels good, like I said, to be trusted as a safe space for all these people.
Now, Ari, if there's anybody in our audience who's listening to this and feels that they would like to give you a call, how would they do that?
They can reach out through the Addicts in the Dark website, which is addictsinthedark.net. You can click call Nick at the top right corner. And then we can set up the call from there. Once you click call Nick, you'll just give me your time zone, and we'll get in touch from there and set up a time to chat. You can also reach out through email at addictsinthedark@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you for that, Nick. My final question. Now that you are where you are in your recovery, what do you look forward to?
Life, growing. When you're in active addiction, you don't grow. You don't grow emotionally. You don't grow mentally. It's felt like I was 14 years old until I was 30 something.
That's a feeling.
Yeah. And so now at 33, I feel like I've been growing for a little bit mentally and emotionally. And that's what I look forward to. I look forward to continuing to encourage myself to become the person that I always wanted to be, aside from the person that just wanted to be a radio host.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
That's what actually you make me well up a little bit. That's beautiful. All right, Mr. Grizzly, did you have a final question or something before?
No. I'm just going through everything in my head right now.
Yeah. Ari, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
We're really grateful because in this case you trusted us.
You're welcome to come back anytime you want if you want to just have a chat with us.
Great.
Yes,
Appreciate
anytime. Because we do want to talk more about the subject. as we asked you at the beginning of the show, how's your mental health today? We start every one of our episodes. I asked Mr. Grizzly how's mental health is doing today. So, this is a subject we don't want to just deal with once and then say, we did it, tick a box off and say, yeah, like we did our addiction episode, go listen to it. We want to stick with this. So please, you are welcome anytime. If anything happens in the news, that makes your ears prick up and you say, hey, wait a minute, I need to bring that somewhere. You always have a home here.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you. We appreciate your time, your words, your wisdom, your candor. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Our best to your lovely, lovely lady.
Thank you. I'll let her know.
And our best to you. Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care. We'll talk to you again.
Bye. All right. Talk soon, guys.
Oh, boy. That's
bit of an emotional roller coaster. Real, right? Yeah, that's as real as it gets. It made me think of a lot of past experiences I've had with friends and loved ones, and it's some of the things he was talking about just lit a light bulb up for me, and then it's like, anxiety and depression feed addiction, and vice versa. You turn to the substance to get away from the anxiety, and then that throws fuel on the fire of depression.
Yeah, and it works for a while until it doesn't, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That was heavy, but it was good. It was worth it. I'm glad we did this. I'm really grateful for Ari and addictsinthedark.net. I'll put that back up on the screen there.
Yeah.
Here, where is it? addictsinthedark.net.
Here for you if you want.
And check the website out if you want to. We'll just show the web page here on the screen. addictsinthedark.net. You can go in and if you need to, go in, click the button that says call Nick, and you can have a conversation with him.
Absolutely. And as you notice, as you're seeing across the screen, the episodes 45 from the Halls of Legislation to the Depths of Libation, Senator Patrick Brazeau. So if you liked our interview with the senator, I think you might like that one too. And it is through Senator Brazeau's office, Kids and Cubs, that we were put in contact with Ari and the Addicts in the Dark net podcast. So we have to thank everybody. The office of the senator has been connecting us with people that they thought would bring value. And based on this conversation, we were not steered wrong at all.
No, not at all.
No. So, Mr. Grizzly, do we have a show?
We do indeed, sir.
Okay. Kits and Cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we really, really loved making this one for you. Remember that sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us and about the Addicts in the Dark podcast. If you would like to subscribe so that you don't have to miss an episode, well, you can do that thanks to the Ray Girl. If you scan that QR code that is below my chin, that will bring you to our pod page site. That's podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. And if you click subscribe there, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it will come directly to you. If you would like to help us in other ways, you need to make like Kit Elaine, because if she was here this evening, she would tell you to have a great day. And remember to smash that button. So go to our True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page, and there we have like, share, and subscribe. Go crazy. Smash all you want. Have fun. We approve. And if you would like to help us in other ways, the QR code that's going to appear right by Mr. Grizzly's head very soon will bring you to our coffee page, where you will find the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund, where you can buy Mr. Grizzly a coffee or me a hot chocolate if you would like to help us, market, produce, write the show, find guests for you. All of that helps. Every drop and tittle adds to the pot. So if you happen to be weighed down by the change in your pocket, we're here to help. So you go to ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, lowercase letters, all in one word, and there you will find our tip jar. Anything that you can contribute is great. And if you can't at the moment, that is quite all right, because the gift of your attention is the gift that we cherish the most. And we want to hear from you. So if you've got something to say, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is our address, or you can reach us on our Twitter feed @TrueEager, our Facebook page, True North Eager Beaver, or leave a message on our YouTube page in the comments section over there. We try to read everything. Also, because it is Mental Health Walk Week, as we mentioned, our mustering point is by the Museum of Nature in Ottawa at noon on the 15th, the day before Father's Day, and we will take a little walk. And at 3 p.m., we will air our monthly podcast live with our guests, Senator Brazeau and his lovely spouse, Dr. Marie-Claire Brazeau. So we hope that you join us for that. As well, our T-shirts are still for sale. You will not be able to get them in time for the walk, but the proceeds will go to good causes. So if you would like one, again, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is the email address. You just e-transfer $35 there and your shirt size and your mailing address, and we'll get one to you. And if you just want to make a donation, it doesn't matter for the T-shirt, that kind of stuff. That's the same place that you make it, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. Just indicate that it is for the mental health walk, and we'll make sure that it gets sent over there and not into our tip jar.
It goes directly to the purchase of the T-shirt, which we're not turning a profit on these T-shirts. This is literally the money's
net proceeds for the T-shirts also go straight to the causes. This is all. This is not for us.
No, not at all.
This thing that we're doing. If you want to tip us separately, that's fine. But this is where we're not taking a cut out of any of this. All right. Let's see what else. Because democracy is something that you do. Remember to write. You know what? I'm gonna just today, exceptionally, I'm not gonna talk about calling Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor for our veterans, but you might want to contact the Minister of Health, Mark Holland, this time around, and let him know.
Now, we do understand that each province is responsible for healthcare, but maybe we can get some weight from the federal government to just lean on the province a little bit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and if write your provincial Minister of Health too, and your premiers.
Yes.
Tell them that you want better services, because right now it's in the news a lot. And there are a lot of people. It seems to be fashionable to poo-poo on harm reduction at the moment. Harm reduction saves a lot of lives.
Saves a lot of lives.
And sometimes it buys the time that people need to be able to realize that they need to go get help, because you can't get help if you're dead.
No.
All right. So, if you can write a letter and ask our elected representatives to really promote harm reduction and get serious about it, that would make us very happy. And all the other stuff in terms of what's going on in the provinces for elections and leadership races, so we won't mention that today. We'll just stick to that.
That works well today.
All right. Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom?
Yeah. If you have somebody in your circle of friends, family, colleagues who is struggling, find a way to reach out to them. I can't tell you what that way will be. You would hopefully know best, but try and find a way to reach out to them, because they probably need your help, and they don't need to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge. Just help them out any way they can. Any way you can, any way they need, because believe me, you can save a life.
Yeah, indeed. From the Beaver Lodge, this is your Eager Beaver saying, especially for this episode, be kind to and gentle with yourself. Mr. Grizzly, please roll the credits. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.